Now, back to Steiny and Guru on 95.7 The Game.
Matt Stein, Matt Stowell, the Guru Johnson with you. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to 95.7 The Game. And let's introduce Cam Inman, Bay Area News Group, covers the San Francisco 49ers. OTA, time of the season. What's going on, Cam? How you doing, man?
I'm great. Good afternoon. How are you guys?
Let me ask you a question, Cam. Why are people so confused about the 49er quarterback situation? It's pretty simple. Brock Purdy's the number one, and if he can quarterback week one, he will. If he can't, Trey Lance will hold it down until Purdy's ready. Simple.
Exactly. So why do you have to have me on? You kind of summed it up pretty good.
All right. Well, you can add to it.
I can add to it. Well, I mean, okay, let's think about it. Today is the last day of school here in Pleasanton, so I can give a commencement speech if I can. Let's do a commencement speech for the 49er quarterbacks and thank everybody for their time of working under the guise of a true competition when we all really know that life's not fair. And come September 10th, there's going to probably be one quarterback starting for the 49ers, and his name's probably going to be Brock Purdy. How's that?
Wow. Great job, Cam. Listen, Stoney and I and everybody's just been fixated on the quarterback position. But, I started looking at Ayuk. It looked like he put on some muscle, some good weight. And I was asking Stoney, you know what? How big of the gap is it between Debo and Ayuk? And I looked at the numbers. Ayuk had 8 touchdowns to Debo's 5. Debo had 2 in the air, 3 rushing. But just as a natural receiver with the hands and route running, could I give a slight edge to Ayuk, Cam?
I think they're just such different receivers, though. I mean, Ayuk's kind of the more prototypical wide receiver, where Debo is just a guy that he's so physical, and you get him into open space, defenders are really reluctant to hit him or touch him or bring him down. So, and then it's not a team that's relying on, a wide receiver one. And it can be either one of those guys, but then you have McCaffrey. And then you add in the fact that George Kittle really came on strong with Brock Purdy the last 2 months of the season. So all of a sudden you have 4 guys that are capable of being your team-leading receiver, and that's pretty impressive on an offense that's, I mean, for the most part, it's supposed to be run-oriented, right, under Shanahan. And then the last 2 months of that season, though, with Purdy, it was much more explosive rather than a run-based offense. So, you still do have, really possibly the best running back or all-around running back in the NFL in McCaffrey, and then you got Elijah Mitchell and some good depth behind him. But, I mean, Ayuk's had a great offseason. He was the MVP probably of last offseason and last training camp, too, and that was a prelude to his first 1,000-yard season. So it's kind of it's really good on his part to come in and perform really well. At the same time, here's the deal. What are we, 5 months into this off season or whatever? We've seen 2 hours of practice football. So everything you're hearing out of 49ers OTAs, it's all exaggerated. I mean, there's so much stuff we haven't seen or know, and then so much still to get to before they even play in Pittsburgh on September 10th.
Cam Inman joining us on 95.7 The Game. I want to ask you about McCaffrey, because obviously when he was acquired, the offense looked better. They went to the next level. Is there any way to figure out how much of that was McCaffrey, how much of that was Brock Purdy?
Oh, gosh. I mean, but there's also Shanahan figuring out different ways to use McCaffrey. I mean, I think a lot of this really was McCaffrey-oriented. I mean, he fits so well into this system as a running back and as a receiver, and he's just the work ethic. And, I mean, he really does, as much as Nick Bosa is a pro and take his craft so seriously on the defensive side, McCaffrey's kind of a mirror of that on the offensive side. He's such a catalyst and a weapon that you can really trigger the whole offense around him more so than the quarterback.
Cam, let me ask you this. I know the Niners got Hargrave from Philly. I love that. But of the guys that they lost, who do you which one do you think it will have the biggest impact? Anybody on your list to where a guy that left the Niners? Mine is Jimmy Ward.
Well, let's start with Jimmy Ward real quick, just because he was around here for 9 years, and he played a lot of different positions in the defensive backfield. Was kind of a captain, but he was really sour about playing nickelback last year, and they replaced him with Isaiah Oliver, kind of a bigger guy, and he's probably going to be asked to blitz a little bit more. I think it's going to be a really curious addition to see how he kind of meshes in in that backfield. But you know what? Also, it means that Travarius Ward's going to be stepping up as the vocal leader of the secondary, even though you got Hufanga and Gibson back there. So that's Ward's impact. I think the bigger one, because there weren't many guys that left. I mean, Garoppolo obviously left, and that's the marquee departure, even though Purdy and Lance and Sam Darnold are here. But I look at right tackle, and as much as everybody loved to hate on Mike McGlinchey the last few years with the occasional pass protection breakdown, you're sticking in Colton McKivitz right now and saying the job is yours, and nobody's really seen how he can play on a consistent level. He's been a great plug-in guy over the years, but it'll be interesting to see. Nobody's expecting him to be as great of a run blocker as McGlinchey. That's what the coaches and everybody are admitting to, and I think that's really important because if this is a run-oriented offense again. You better have a guy that can block well. And it's not just that. You got to get in synchronicity with that line, which for the most part should remain the same as last year. But that's going to be a big one. The other spots are kind of who's the number 3 linebacker? That's to be decided. But for the most part, the crux of this team is coming back, and then you just circle back to the quarterback position, and it forever will be the number 1 focus of anybody, whoever's playing it, whatever health they're in.
Cam Inman joining us on 95.7 The Game. He covers the San Francisco 49ers for the Bay Area News Group. Have there been any rookies that have stood out so far, or is it too early?
Well, I mean, the biggest addition rookie-wise was Jake Moody, the kicker, right? But what are you really going to judge when he's not kicking in the snow in Lambeau? He's kicking in 70-degree sunshine with a bay breeze at his back with nobody really rushing him, and he looks fine. You got Ronnie Bell, the 7th-round wide receiver out of Michigan, who he looked really good last week in OTAs, and then this week he dropped a couple passes, so that's kind of, okay, that's a rookie. But they talk him up really well and think that he could be a return specialist, which maybe puts Ray McLeod on alert, even though he seemed to be kind of settled into that role pretty well last year as like a number 4 or 5 wide receiver and a return specialist. They like their linebackers. They got the tight ends. I tell you what, the 2 tight ends they drafted, I think they're really going to push for roster spots that belong to Ross Dwelley and Charlie Warner. I think that's going to be something to watch in training camp because I think they're really high on them. Those guys look like they're NFL ready. But the most NFL ready rookie is the first one they drafted, and that's Jair Brown, who's going to be playing kind of as a number 3 safety if he doesn't already push Gibson out of the lineup immediately at some point, and he probably will within the next year.
What were your thoughts when you heard that Trey Lance was working on his throwing motion and he was out there with Mahomes? I mean, Cam, I liked it, but then I thought to myself, I hadn't heard anything about it that it needed any adjustment. But what are your overall thoughts, and what have you seen from him throwing the rock early on?
Well, let me first start off. I haven't been that wowed by any of Trey's throws or Darnold's throws. There's been 1 or 2 where you go, that's impressive, but again, they're not facing a pass rush. You really have to stop rushing the judgments in these kind of spring workouts. The throwing motion looks a little crisper and quicker, which is good. The storyline this offseason that the coaches have talked about is Lance's development was really betrayed by a finger fracture in his rookie season's preseason finale against the Raiders when he fractured his index finger, and that affected his grip for over a year. And then you compensate with other things. So there's been a lot made about the throwing motion to me, and that's fine. I mean, once they're in the game, the throwing motion might all change, right? He might just revert to whatever. But right now, I've been looking more about his ankle because that's where he left, guys. He broke that right ankle in the home opener. That's a pretty gruesome injury, and it required 2 surgeries. So it's I've been just watching to see how he moves, and he's been in the pocket. He's looked really fine. He looks fine. It doesn't look like there's any hitch to him running around, but he hasn't run around much. There's been no zone read type of plays in the OTAs we've seen, so we haven't gotten a really great gauge in terms of his mobility and speed, but everything, Brian Greasy talked to us yesterday, and he said his ankle hasn't been a factor in OTAs, so that's really good. Trey's always been kind of an uplifting personality. Even when he wasn't playing last year, he helped Purdy out, so he's in good standing with the Niners. If Purdy's not ready to go, then I would think Trey Lance is going to be your guy. I know Sam Darnold has gotten a lot of support from the outsiders, and he looks fine. But I mean, if Trey can't beat him out through the off season and training camp, then that's a big issue because Trey knows this offense so much, and they've invested so much in him that you actually have to let him play. And if he's finally healthy to play, I'd like to see him play. So. That's where we're at with. Hey, I got a piece of trivia for you though.
Steiny likes this.
You ready? This?
Yeah.
Steiny's gonna love this one.
All right.
All right, Steiny. Where was Trey Lance drafted? What pick?
3rd.
Do you know who was picked? About 20 years ago, 3rd overall in the NBA draft?
Dunleavy.
Mike Dunleavy Jr.
Hey, Cam.
Nice. Nice.
I hope it's
let's
better
hope.
than
Let's hope. Yeah, well,
Cam. Oh no!
Mike was a good NBA player. He just wasn't a star.
Yeah, right.
But
he wasn't.
I'm not saying anything about his career. I'm just saying it was interesting that they're both number 3 overall draft picks, and that comes with so much focus and attention on them, and so many expectations. Right? So,
yeah. Good point.
I mean, it's like here's the thing with Trey is. People can make all their opinions about how he looks, but nobody's seen the guy play.
Right.
It's just like we can't say he's a bust. You can't say he looks great because nobody's seen him doing it.
And he hasn't played with McCaffrey, Cam.
Correct. That's a big thing. I mean, it's a great. Whoever's playing quarterback, it's a great situation because you have a tremendous supporting cast, great defense, a solid coach. A stable organization, right? That's a great situation to walk into. And Trey knows that, and that's why he says he wasn't looking to get out and get traded this offseason, and they didn't. I mean, there was no really reason to trade him when you're not sure of Purdy's health, and it's not like Trey's stock is anything high right now since he hasn't played for 2 years. So, one more thing is we were asking Greasy. Somebody asked Greasy yesterday about what Trey Lance's confidence level is at, and I'm like, Trey's confidence has never been an issue, but Greasy kind of answered it in a interesting way, saying, well, nobody really knows what your confidence is until you're actually out there playing, and he hasn't played. Right? And so it's like the last time he played a full game was in that monsoon in Chicago, and it was a disaster, like all around. So that's kind of an anomaly. He's not going to be doing that on a weekly basis, so nobody really knows.
Hey, Cam, before we let you go, just a random question here. Stoney and I were talking about receivers yesterday, and I'd mentioned, Ayuk had 1,000 yards, and Stoney was like, you know what, Goo, they got 17 games now, extra game. Random. But does 1,000 yards carry the same weight anymore with the extra game?
Yeah, because it's still a mile marker, but I mean, and it's not like every team. The Niners haven't had. I had this stat earlier. Something about like they haven't had multiple 1,000-yard receivers in about 20 years or something like that.
Wow.
More than one guy, right? I think it might even be way further back. It may have been in like T.O. and Jerry Rice days, something like that, like in 2000. So to me, that does carry weight. I think the 1,000-yard rusher, when running backs aren't so, dependent in the NFL now, there's only about like 5 or 6 a year that really get over that 1,200-yard mark. And, the guys that are going for the title, they're not going. You would think the 2,000-yard barrier would be something, but they're not hitting that either.
Yeah, exactly. I'll do the math for Guru after we get you off the line, Cam, because it's not even close to the same. Hey, really appreciate you joining us, and we'll be talking to you the rest of the summer, I'm sure.
Hags, have a great summer, boys.
All righty. That's Cam Inman, Bay Area News Group, covers the San Francisco 49ers.